A few years back, I worked at a job where the boss he was quite a micromanager. They any project that we would have, or any whether it was graphic design work or whether it was a flyer or whatever it was, he would pretty much change it to what he saw fit, as opposed to what he hired me to do, which was to do the work that I thought was appropriate for the job.
Before coming to Bo Digital, I was an educator. I was actually a kindergarten and first grade teacher for 5 years, and I worked at two different schools. And so, my first school, I had a principal who was very cold. Um, I felt like she just wanted to make sure that us teachers knew that she was in charge, which is totally fine. But it gave the school and the atmosphere and the culture this like terrible feeling. And teachers were scared to make mistakes, and there was no room for error, and there was no room for teachers to be human. And when the principal would come around, you knew that you probably did something wrong for her to come and talk to you. So when you would see, her walking down the hall, or chatting with another teacher, everyone was like, "Oh, like, what did they do wrong? What did they get in trouble for?" And it also made the culture from teacher to teacher even a little bit hostile, because at other school atmospheres and other places of work, you want to share your good ideas, you want to share the positives that are happening in your classroom. And that just didn't happen. It wasn't promoted. It wasn't, recognized if you were doing something good or being helpful for somebody else. And so at the end of the day, people were kind of keeping their good ideas to themselves, because they wanted to be recognized for that one positive thing, or be seen for them doing that positive thing.
I was at a company for a little over a decade. And at that company, we went through managers and leaders about every 12 to 18 months. Because from the top down, that organization was built upon do as I say, not as I do, and not as I am capable of doing. And that's something that I didn't realize was important to me early on in my working career as much as it is now, where if I'm being told to do something and I have questions about how to do it, the best approach, what's a different strategy to think about, how does this actually look in real life? And I come to my direct supervisor or my leader and ask those styles of questions, and they can't answer me because they've never done it and don't know how to do it and aren't willing to make an effort to learn so that they can better lead me during that process. That was a huge turnoff, and made me lose a lot of respect for those leaders at that organization that weren't even willing to learn enough to be able to better guide me, because I needed to make the best outcome possible. Yet there was no willingness for effort or time or their resources to really get in the trenches, per se, with me so that we could come out of it together on the other side.
And so I guess that's one of the biggest lessons that I've taken away from observing those in leadership positions, is that you're always kind of under a microscope. Your decisions have a lot bigger um, effect than you might think that they do, and your words carry a ton more weight than you think that they do. So that's kind of really made an impression on me. But when I think of something specific, I can think of something as small as one of my first bosses bad mouthing and gossiping about an employee to me in the car on the way to a call, and just being like, this is really not appropriate and I'm really uncomfortable, but what do I say? Like, what do I do? To something like when COVID happened a couple of years ago, and the leader of my organization at the time, when we had called sort of a meeting to really discuss, like, what are we doing, like what are we shutting down, what do we tell our employees, what do we tell those outside the organization. Like, what do we do? Like, this is uncharted territory. And he chose not to be present for that meeting, and to sort of leave it to the rest of his leadership team and the rest of sort of the mid-level leaders who were there to figure it out. He provided some guidance over the phone, but just wasn't there. And that really, really stood out to me as something like, man, like this is your show, and we're all here looking for direction. And as the leader, that's on you. That's not something you can delegate. And that just really made an impression on me as when you're in a position of leadership, you have to really take ownership, like at all levels.